Let's get into this. Vrin, I'm so excited to have you here. I know you are an expert on the topic of Enneagram, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say. Before we dive into any specifics, let me just give you a chance to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you do.
Thank you so much, first of all, for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here. And I'm an Enneagram coach, meditation teacher as well. And one thing I'll maybe preface by saying, what is an Enneagram coach? Well, really, I use the Enneagram to help others understand why they experience reactivity in their lives. And so I also use yoga psychology, meditation, but the framework of the Enneagram is so powerful because it helps us understand why we become reactive. And so that's really what I do. I work with leaders, I work with, I say leaders, but I feel like everybody is a leader. Whether you're a CEO of a company, whether you're a parent, whether you are just someone who is trying to work on yourself, everyone's a leader. So I work with people, human beings.
Right. I love that mindset. And my audience knows that I am very much into meditation. I practice yoga regularly. I have for years, and it's no surprise that our paths cross because we have a lot of overlapping interests and specialties. And yeah, I agree. It is very much everyone is a leader in their own life. And I brought you on to talk about the Enneagram and also to talk a lot about reactivity, which we'll get into all of that. But I know a lot of the parents I work with and the teens I work with can struggle with reactivity and have some really negative consequences in their life as a result. So I'm excited to dig into this with you. Let's just get started by talking about the Enneagram a little bit. So talk to me. I know a little bit about it, but talk
Yes.
to me and explain it as though I've never heard of it, because I know there are many people in my audience who haven't. So how would you explain that?
So the Enneagram, literally Ennea and gram, Ennea meaning nine, gram meaning figure, a nine-pointed figure, is a framework that helps us understand why we do anything that we do. It specifically focuses on meditation. And so, although it's known as a personality typology, it differs from other frameworks, which can be very useful as well, but they tend to be more behaviorally based. And that is why I'll say right off the top, a test typically doesn't help you in figuring out the lens in which you see the world through, according to the Enneagram,
Yeah.
because it requires deep questioning to really get to the heart of what is your motivation, what drives you. And so coming back to that piece about nine, the Enneagram speaks about nine lenses or nine motivations by which we see, interact, and process the world through. Now, we have all of these nine energies within us, but there's one that really drives the show. And so when we start to tap into that and really start to see how almost every interaction we have has this kind of propelling it unconsciously behind it, we really start to experience a type of self-awareness that otherwise is often intangible or can almost feel a little woo-woo. There's a sense of practicality here. I'm starting to really see, wow, this shows up in everything that I do.
Yeah. The lenses is so important to recognize. And I also love that you mentioned that all nine of the numbers or the personality types are in everyone, and it is all really driven by a primary motivation. So when somebody is able to identify which of the nine is their primary, how could that really help them in their life?
They start to recognize what are the fears and the needs that drive them. That's really what comprises motivation, right? And so there are things that I need. Often they're very unconscious to me. We really need somebody to reflect or mirror what our needs are. And often we haven't received that. And that's because our parents haven't received that. And so that kind of cycle continues. It's not in any way their fault, but we can start to shift that by starting to tap into our own. And then when we are offering care to others, whether it's in the role of a parent or whether it's in a role of a caregiver, we can offer that gift to other people. But it starts with ourselves first. right? So when I understand what are the needs that motivate me, this is what I'm constantly going after. These are the fears. This is what I'm trying to constantly avoid. Now I'm starting to see my behaviors in relationship to that. And that gives us an opportunity to exercise compassion for ourselves, right? Because it's so easy to guilt or shame ourselves into thinking, wow, why did I do that? I constantly keep doing that, but no change actually occurs. And I really believe when we start to understand why and really dig into that, taking that time to recognize, acknowledge, then it's possible to start that transformation process, primarily because we realize the need or that fear isn't bad on its own. It's the way in which I'm trying to achieve it or I'm trying to uh, avoid it that is causing the challenge.
Yeah. So it sounds like first it starts with this awareness and then an understanding, but really compassion for the self, for whatever is. But it does take some courage to be able to delve into the why and really look into your internal needs and your internal fears and face them. And it sounds like that's really where the transformation or any type of change could really happen.
Exactly. Exactly. And that process of building awareness is not something that can take place right away.
Mhm.
It can take years. This is a lifelong type of journey that we embark on when we meet a type of tool like the Enneagram that yes, you may get some quote quick wins here and there, but you're really in it for the process. And as you go through the process, you start to naturally transform and change because you just experience how much more is being revealed to you.
Mhm. It really is a process. And it's so important to recognize that because I know a lot of my clients can get really down on themselves when they feel like they're making these efforts to make changes in their life and they kind of hit the ground running and things are going well. And then something will happen and they'll think, oh gosh, I failed. I can't do this. This isn't working. And then they
Right.
stop and they back off. But what you're saying is it's important to continue this journey and recognize that there's no specific endpoint where you just are there. You're like, oh my gosh, I made it.
Exactly. And I'm sure you probably relate. I remember when I was undergoing my coaching training, one of the things that really caught me by surprise, and I think about this in every session I have with an individual or when I'm working with teams and companies, that resistance is actually something very powerful. We can actually get excited instead of feeling deflated or disappointed really when we experience resistance because we're coming up against another edge, right? We're coming up against something that perhaps we haven't seen before or that the circumstance in which we're experiencing this is bringing out of us. It's
Mhm.
an opportunity to actually learn something new.
It's so true. And all of those challenges, if you choose to look at them that way, are opportunities for growth and for self reflection. And it's a really good way of looking at that. I have a question about the 9 types. Would you say that our type is determined by like when we're born, we're just born with it? Or is this something that's created through our life experience?
Great question. So, Enneagram experts have been finding more evidence, you could say, towards recognizing it's a combination of both nurture and nature. And so we come in with, you can say, our type hardwired. And one way in which you can look at this personality we're talking about is that this is the wiring of our ego.
Yes.
This is not our true self. What the what the ego is trying to do is it's trying to replicate qualities of the true self,
Mm,
right? And so that's why we experience shadows and gifts of each of the types.
okay.
And when we're really aware, the ego doesn't need to replicate anything because we're just naturally embodying it.
Wow. And that really pulled into all of my experience and training in psychology and the ego and also tying in with the subconscious mind. And the work I do with my clients is very much getting in tune with who they are, just their innate essence, when they're not in that ego mind and when in the conscious mind. And it sounds like this really is a great tool to be able to reflect upon that and aid you and help you in getting back in touch with that essence.
Exactly, exactly. Essence, spirit, that's who we really are. And so there's a way that even each of the 9 types, they have something called essence qualities. So these are the qualities we kind of inherently and unconsciously know we're hardwired to to bring this out into the world and to serve others and to really make an impact in this way. And that's why each of the types, there's no type that's better or worse than
Yeah.
another type, right? There's just, even though we may feel our type may be the worst, it's not true, right? It's
It's
all
funny that you
dependent.
say that. Yeah. Because when I first took the test, I'm like kind of on the border of two different ones, and I wanted it to be one more than the other because I didn't want to be associated as much with this other one. And it's like, yes, that is the ego mind 100%.
Yes, exactly, right? So it's it's so true. Often, my own teachers have said that when you come across your type, you will feel uncomfortable
Yeah.
because it's not how you necessarily want to be
Right.
seen, but it's really showing you this map, an internal map of how you're wired,
Yeah.
and it can bring about a sense of confrontation. And so that's coming back to your question. That's the nature part,
Right.
right? That I'm inherently wired. I come in with this kind of conditioning
Mhm.
of how I react and interact with the world with these fears and desires. And so there is also a huge place for nurture, however. And so depending on the social structure I'm coming into, whether it's my family of origin, whether it's my community, whether it's the country, all of those may have a certain type energy associated with them as well, right? And so now you're having that influence coming upon you as well. And
Mhm.
so I've experienced people actually completely mistyping themselves because the culture around them values a particular type. And so they've just kind of almost molded themselves in that way when actually their innate wiring is very different.
Yeah.
And then there are others who just completely rebel against that,
Mm.
right? And then they have a very difficult relationship with that energy because it feels like it's being forced upon them,
So
right?
what
So there's that
happens?
tension.
Yeah, when someone is rejecting or turning away from their natural type, what might be some consequences of that?
Ultimately, I think there's a consequence of not really being able to fully be authentic.
Mhm.
And there's this internal tension constantly of, is this what I really want? And so is something that perhaps your audience might experience, they've experienced themselves or with their kids, that, we hear that at times, not all parents definitely, but some parents, they feel a sense of, oh, really encouraging a child to go in a particular direction,
Mhm.
right? But that doesn't feel innately uh, natural to the child. And
Right.
so if there is a healthy dynamic, then a conversation can be had, and then through a mutual agreement, there's a way in which support can be given to the child to pursue their natural inclination. Now, we've all been that child, and this isn't purely in the career professional sense. Just the way in which we show up in the world is
Right.
influenced by that. And so we can experience that through that type of rebelling, a type of suppression of self,
Mhm.
and sometimes a complete sense of, and I've experienced this with people who realize that their type is actually very different than what they've thought, a sense of wonder that, how could I have missed this?
Yeah. Right. Because they've spent so much time covering it up or not even looking in that direction. So it very much in that way it is the conditioning. And
Yes.
you're absolutely correct. It's through no most of the parents I talk to, they don't intend to do this, but what they're doing is they are guiding their teen in a direction that isn't inherently best for the teen because the parent thinks it's what's best for the teen because they have the best interests at heart. That's the source of it all.
Exactly.
But they're not looking at the whole picture and really following the teen's lead because there's some fear there. Now, I know we
Mhm.
mentioned there's a couple things that I'd like to touch upon. One is when it comes to supporting a teen with this particular tool, how do you imagine would be a good like first step in approaching that?
Great question. Yeah, I think the first step is, if we're the parent, to really start with identifying ourselves first. What is my core need, fear? What is my motivation? And
Mhm.
really being able to spend some time with that. Because if that is coloring everything that I do, then of course it's going to color all my interactions with everybody I spend time with, including my teen or my child, right? And so when I start to honestly acknowledge, wow, this is my wiring. Okay, perhaps I'm a person who my core need, and this is for one of the types, is really to experience a sense of internal peace.
Mm.
Right. I really don't want conflict. I don't like the loud sounds, loud noises, high emotions, low emotions. Like, let's really kind of keep it like steady and calm, and let's just kind of keep it harmonious, right? Then I start to recognize, wow, there are certain things that are beautiful about that, but there are certain challenges as well.
Mhm.
Because once I recognize that for myself, now if I start to observe my teen or my child, and I'm recognizing, wow, they're built so differently from me.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay, I really, really love this. Like, I want peace, unity, flow. That's what I'm all about. And for them, they're just so driven. They're so
Mhm.
driven, and they need to be a part of so many things. And it's overwhelming for me because they're so energetic, and I don't know what to do with that. And perhaps they're so ambitious, and I'm feeling a sense of, I don't know if I can keep up with that. Well, maybe if I can't keep up with that, I temper them down. Or sometimes the dynamic is the opposite. The parent is more, yeah, I'm really driven and I've done so many things in my life, and I see the potential in my child. Come on, you just need to like put yourself out there a little bit more, and so we experience these tensions, right? And in the tension, what can get lost is that on both sides, there are incredible gifts.
Yeah.
But is there a value on both sides
Mhm.
for each other's gift?
Yeah. It starts with you, basically, is the message. Getting to know yourself, understanding your needs, your fears, so that you can best support your teen. And one of the things that comes up that I think that this could really help with, and I know you are really good at talking about this and explaining this, is knowing how to not act upon those fears and needs
Yeah.
to the detriment of your relationship with your teen or to their experience, being less reactive. Tell me a little bit about how parents can do that.
So I'll take from Viktor Frankl, right? To paraphrase, he said that it's the space between stimulus and response where we find our greatest freedom, right? And so I think for many of us, we've heard this phrase of pause. I just need to pause between stimulus and response. Or in our case, often it's stimulus and reaction. It's not even a response, right? I'm just reacting. And in order to do that, this is really where that piece of needs and fears come in, that if I'm aware of my needs and fears, then when a stimulus comes in, my child is talking back at me or they're being rude, and that's pressing on certain buttons, right? Then I'm able to, and I'll bring in something from an amazing yoga text known as the Gita, which you might be familiar with. And in the Gita, it actually speaks about this concept of um, of being able to pause. And there, it speaks about how if we can recognize that all the stimulus that we experience is actually coming through our senses, it's my sense perception. It's my perception right now. My child is being rude to me.
Right.
That's my perception. Now, it's also true that my senses are imperfect,
Yes.
which we forget, which I know
Uh-huh.
I forget
Oh,
all the
yeah.
time, right? So if I can hold those things, and the Gita says, what the the wise person, what they're able to do is they recognize that happiness and distress are like the winter and summer seasons, right? They are non-permanent and they appear and disappear,
Yeah.
right? And they arise due to sense perception. Happiness and distress arise due to sense perception. The wise person learns to tolerate. And so, what my own experience of trying to practice this in my life with my kids, who are not teens yet, but definitely I get attitude,
Oh,
especially
yeah.
from my older one, that that space, that pausing is actually a place to exercise tolerance.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
tolerate the suffering. I tolerate that my experience of my child in this moment is that an experience of feeling disrespected or their attitude is rude towards me.
Mhm.
Now, when I tolerate, often toleration has a passivity associated with
Yeah.
it, right? It's like, I just need to tolerate. I just need to tolerate. But that's not what tolerance is about. In this case, it's about how can I now bring in some intelligence, some intentionality. When I'm tolerating, I hold my suffering instead of allowing it to just spill out, which is what a reaction is often about,
Mhm.
right? When I tolerate, there is space to consider other possibilities.
Yeah.
In my case, is she hungry? Is she tired? I think this applies to all of us, though, not just a 4.5
Absolutely.
year old.
Am I hungry? Am I tired?
Right. Am I hungry? Am I tired? Okay. Basic needs first, not
Uh-huh.
even just needs, basic needs.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, is there a need that's not being met in her right now? Maybe she went to school and she had a bad day. Somebody said something I'm not aware of. There are other possibilities out there.
Yeah.
And when I hold that, that might give me the opportunity to respond rather than saying, "You're so rude, go to your room, you're grounded," to perhaps question and say, I'm hearing I'm hearing some sadness or some disappointment. And then we actually have an opportunity to allow our heart to extend to the other and perhaps experience that sensitivity. I'm hearing something else other underneath that layer of quote rudeness. There's
Yeah.
something else.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where the meditation practice really comes in, is practicing being the witness of what's
Yes,
occurring without acting on it. Right. And this is something I encourage my audience to do all the time. And then when it comes to your child, instead of reacting, getting curious about what's really going on is this is what I say. And it's exactly in line with what you're recommending. Getting curious and then really reflecting upon so that you're more intentional with your actions. And not only that, you're modeling that for them.
exactly.
There's like
Exactly.
so many benefits of it all.
You're breaking a cycle, you're
Mhm.
starting a new cycle. The other individual on the other side is now feeling like, wow, I'm I feel seen.
Yeah.
And that immediately lowers defenses. And now an actual connection can take place.
I love the two that you said tolerance isn't passivity, because when I hear tolerance, I immediately my brain goes to, oh, then you're allowing your kid to just walk all over you. And that is the message that people may hear. But that's not really what's happening there.
No,
You have agency over your own body and your own words and your own feelings. And you can hold space for that and also be more intentional about how you respond.
exactly. Exactly. This was really a game changer for me. This was a realization my husband had that he shared with me. So hat tip to him of the sense of like let's remove that kind of layer that we associate with tolerance. It's not passive. It's passive if we're not actually using that time wisely,
Right.
right? But if we're using it with intention and through a meditation practice, through just learning to pause in numerous different ways, we're trying to bring that in more and more into our lives, then it's actually very active because now I have the ability to choose this is the time to speak, or perhaps I delay a conversation, but that doesn't mean I forget.
Yeah. It's the pause button
Exactly.
that's maybe necessary in that situation. it comes back to that self-reflection. Am I too activated right now to respond in a way that I will look back upon and think that was a good course of action or the right course of action, the best one for that situation? And that's the same thing that happens when you're in the meditation practice, whatever practice it is that you're using to practice mindfulness and being still and being present with what is. To be able to tolerate that experience of discomfort without having to change it and do anything.
Yes, exactly. And to recognize this is part of life. That
Yes.
life isn't all about being comfortable, that I have the capacity and I have the opportunity to build the capacity to just be with discomfort without needing to react to it. I can just sit with it.
Exactly. And like you said, it all starts with that self awareness, knowing at your core what your needs and fears are, having that, living with it, experiencing it within yourself, responding to the world with that knowledge and getting feedback, and then just learning and growing as you go. And I can imagine this is a tool too that teens themselves, if they're open to it, could really benefit from having. So it does start with a parent, though.
Yes,
You try it, you figure it out, you put it on, you see what it's all about. And then if your teenager is open to it, absolutely present it as an opportunity for them to learn more about themselves. But it does have to, I believe, in order to be really effective, come from an innate desire to learn and grow as an individual.
exactly. And I'll say here that two things. One, as a parent, we can get really excited when we're learning all these things about ourselves that we almost want to type our children.
Yeah.
Right. And but that's a journey they really should go on, and
Mm.
that we rob them of that experience. Now, that doesn't mean that we may internally type them. And if you do, go ahead and use that information of what are their needs and fears and try that out for size, because you're now able to potentially speak a language that they understand
Mhm.
by using that. And so that may just help to strengthen your own hypothesis, but still, there is no need to interject that on a child,
Yeah.
right? And then the other piece is that if there are parents in your audience who may not have teens, but who have kids who are younger, in some ways, it's even better if you can start younger, because now this is so helpful as they're growing up to
Mhm.
start recognizing how is my child built.
Right. Understanding who they are as they are
Exactly.
and supporting them with where they are in their journey.
Right.
That is just so amazing. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the Enneagram. Um, if you wouldn't mind giving us a little bit, can you give us kind of the cliffs notes of each one so that my
Sure.
listeners can kind of just get a little like, because they may be listening and being like, well, which one am I? I don't know, because I know that's what I do.
Yes.
Would you be able to share with us just briefly a little bit about each one?
Sure. So maybe I will go through the basic desire, right? Because I think that is not only helpful and inspiring, but it's something that we can really start to look at internally. And so we'll go through the Enneagram. We'll start with the type 1 and then move on. So for the type 1, it's also known as the moralist. My basic desire is to feel aligned, to feel right. These are the individuals who are very principled, right? They stand for something. And with that, there's a sense of high standards because I'm really expecting something very good out of myself. And I want to experience the goodness of others in the world. That's
Okay.
the type 1. For the type 2, my basic desire is to feel love, to feel connected. So they're known as the helpers, and they truly are. They have a sense, they kind of have these invisible tentacles that can figure out your needs, even if you don't understand your needs,
Mhm.
right? And through that, they have an amazing way of making others feel cared for and valuable, really. The
Mhm.
type 3, which is also known as the achiever, the basic desire is to feel superlatively valuable. And so these are go-getters in the world. There are charismatic leaders often because they embody what it means to fulfill and go after your potential,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
And when they're very healthy and aware, they can bring out that potential in others as well.
Okay. Yep.
So for the type 4s, they're known as the individualists, and their basic desires is to feel authentic. So these are, and let me preface this by saying all types can be artists, but these are the quintessential, I am extremely feeling, like I love melancholy,
Mm.
right? If there is a song and there's a particular part of the song that I love, I'll play this on repeat like 90 times,
Yeah.
right? Because there's a way in which I can really go deep into my emotions. And from that, when I'm very healthy and aware, I can bring about pieces of art, whether it's visual, whether it's written, whether it's musical, that really capture a universality that everyone can experience,
Okay.
right? So now we move to the 5, which is known as the investigator. And the 5s, their basic desire is to feel encyclopedic, actually. I want to know so much. And the reason for that is that 5s can often feel like I'm born on the wrong planet.
Mm.
There's a way in which I'm trying to really take in as much information as possible so I can access this clarity and illumination of knowing, how do I live in this world?
Mm.
Because it's so complicated. And so I really, really want to understand.
Okay.
Now we move to the type 6, which is known as the loyalist. And their basic desire is to feel safe, to feel secure. Now, these are amazing individuals. They are, you know, you can say the regular Joe, regular Jane, but there's a way in which they make you feel so at ease, and they are so loyal, so reliable, and they really want to be a part of a team,
Okay.
right? And there's something really courageous about that. It's really, really amazing. Now, to the type 7, these are known as the enthusiasts. And as the name suggests, their basic desire is to feel free. They're very experiential, they're very extroverted, and they can very easily feel bored as well. And so they have high energy, flit about from things to things, right? But what they're really after is to experience the world in a way that they can try to outrun the pain of life.
Okay. Yep.
Now we move to the 8, which is known as the challenger. And their basic desire is to feel strong, to feel alive, right? And so these are the individuals who are like, they take life by the horns. They don't so much care about what others think about them, right? They build things from the ground up. It's amazing. And they are incredible protectors when they are at their best. And then finally, we move to the 9, which is known as the peace seekers. And their basic desire is to feel harmonious. That was what I was referring to before, to feel an internal sense of peace. And at their best, they have a way of uniting everyone together because they can naturally see everyone's point of view.
Mm.
But they also can just be very agreeable and go along with things because they don't want to experience or instigate any conflict.
It's interesting as you say all of these. I'm just listening and I'm thinking of all the different people in my life.
Yes, yes.
Like, oh gosh, that is so this person.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm
Mm-hmm.
glad that you shared the positive side or like the healthy side of it on this program because my listeners can there's a lot of information they can get to the shadow side and the challenges as well, but
Yes,
it's so great to be able to hear the positive traits that come along with each one, and at their core this is what you're really aiming for in that reflection, is getting to that healthy expression of
yes.
the Enneagram or your needs and your current desires, and not letting the fears run the show, right?
Exactly. And like you said, yes, I love to focus on the positive. It's something that my teachers have also spoken about a lot because even though it's very rare to find people who embody this of any type, because this is a very high level of consciousness, it's a beautiful aspiration. And that's what we want to aspire towards. Where most of us really fall is kind of in the average level of consciousness,
Yeah.
right? And when we move to the average level of consciousness, that's where we start to fall into patterns of reactivity.
Okay. So would you say then within each Enneagram number, so let's say you discover that you're an Enneagram 5,
Mhm.
and you're noticing that you have a lot of the shadow side and you're driven a lot by the fears and the
Mhm.
reactivity from that. Is it like a scale where you can do the work to become more balanced in the two? Would you say that it's like a scale where it can be adjusted and that would be the goal?
Could you say a little bit more about the scale and the
So
adjustment
what I'm
piece?
imagining in my mind is there's the shadow side on one side,
Mhm.
and then there's the healthy side on the other. And so maybe when
Mm,
they identify the shadow side is the one that's really presenting, and they want to become and feel more aligned and maybe less reactive to that,
mm.
to adjust to becoming more balanced. Would you say that that's the goal versus completely tipped to only healthy or mostly healthy?
Well, I would say that we would aim for mostly healthy or really healthy,
Sure.
but to start the tip, it would really mean to see the need that I'm going after and my pursuit of that,
Yeah.
right? Well, how am I pursuing getting this need? And really getting sitting down and looking to see, am I actually achieving it? Because I think if most of us are very honest, I know I've looked at many and continue to look at many of my patterns of reactivity. And I'm looking to see, am I actually getting my object of desire? And I noticed two things. One is sometimes it's yes, I do. But
Mhm.
here's the caveat, it's short-lived. It's short-lived and it wasn't done in kind of a clean way, right? Which means that perhaps it caused others some type of suffering or it's caused me a particular type of suffering. So that's one thing. So sometimes, yes, I'm getting what I need, but it's more of like an immediate gratification. It's not a long-term type of gratification, right?
That makes sense. Yeah.
The second is I actually don't get what I need, but I
Uh,
keep doing it anyways.
uh-huh.
I just keep doing it. Like I get annoyed. I get annoyed. I get annoyed, and
Uh-huh.
like it's
Right.
not as though anything changes, right?
Yeah.
But I'm still getting annoyed.
Yeah, like for example, you yell at your kids and they stop what they're doing, but in the long term, you're not really getting what you really want, which is
Exactly.
peace and health and a healthy relationship and dynamic. Because yelling
Got
at
it.
your kids isn't going to cause any of that positive outcome, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's the reactivity of it all. If
Right.
someone is wanting to know a little bit more about which Enneagram number, I know that there's quizzes all over the internet. Where do you recommend that they go?
So I recommend three things. So one is if you are not in a huge rush and are willing to really put in the time and effort doing a ton of research. So the wisdom of the Enneagram is kind of, at least to me, like the Bible of the Enneagram. It's very dense, but it has everything there. And it's by Don Riso and Richard and Russ Don Riso and Russ Hudson.
Mhm.
And going through that, perhaps going through other books, and just really approaching it not with like this quick cliff notes, tell me my type now attitude, but rather I want to take this in and like use this as an experiment to see like let me try this on for size. And yeah, am I resonating with this or am I not?
Okay.
Right. So that's one approach. The second approach is to do a workshop where there's an experienced Enneagram teacher or facilitator who can speak to the different types and give an energy and a flavor, bring life to the types, because I think that's where we experience it. One of the things that tests and quizzes can't do is that so much of the energy of the type is conveyed through body language,
Oh, interesting. I didn't know
right?
that. Okay.
Yes, we give away so much about our type just through our
Really?
body language.
Mhm.
Yes. And so that's another way. And then the final way is, and this could, and of course, you could do a combination of all three of these, is to do a one-to-one consultation. And so this is something that I offer that I love to do. And it's a conversation, right? Where we really go into and explore what might be the motivations, needs, and fears of an individual. And typically, the way it's done is there's a little bit of pre-reading material, and most people I've experienced will come and say, I'm pretty sure I'm not these 5 types, right?
Okay.
Because the ones that we don't resonate with so much tend to come much more quickly than the ones we do. And so that gives a starting point then of, okay, well, then let's really kind of focus on these, not neglecting those because
Right.
one of them might come up, but let's focus on these and then really come to a place of, okay, here's a really strong hypothesis. Let's let's get you trying these kinds of um, exercises to really become aware and
Mm.
see which one really is starting to fit for you.
Okay. What about the free quizzes on the internet?
I think they can be really fun. And I've really taken the approach of what one of my teachers who I really respect says. And he says, quizzes and tests can be an initial starting point
Yeah.
if you hold that with the understanding that it could be wrong. Like
Right.
you can take that and say a test or quiz says, it's likely you're a 2.
Yeah.
Okay, so then how do I hold that? Then I go back, I can read about the type 2, and now I'm starting to look and see, is this really my motivation, right? Like I really want to experience love, connection. There's a way in which I lean in. That's one of the, the body language
Mm-hmm.
aspects of like I tend to lean in. There's a way in which I really want to help, and that actually part of um, my motivation that I don't often speak out about or I'm actually unconscious to is because it's in an effort to to feel loved myself,
Mm.
right? I kind of portray sometimes that I'm here to love everybody else, but actually I'm so desperately in need of love
Yeah.
myself,
Yeah.
right? And so because of that, I can actually neglect my own needs, right?
Mm.
That can be a shadow of the 2, right? But the gift of the 2 is, wow, I can really intuit and help fulfill your needs. And so in this way, kind of really start to see
Mhm.
perhaps this could be my type. But as I'm doing this, I'm starting to recognize, wow, I'm really resonating, or no, this is actually feeling a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah. That's a really good insight because it really does all just start with curiosity. I know we talked about curiosity before, but when you're curious about something and when you see it as being a potential benefit and enriching your life somehow, that's when you get interested and delve into it. And I love that you shared the different layers of ways to explore the Enneagram and incorporate it into your life to enhance your quality of life, really.
Yes, that's really it. It's to become, often self-awareness is something that we hear about a lot and we want to experience that, but it can be hard to find a starting place,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And what I've been finding more and more in my own life is, well, reactivity is abundant. So that's a really good starting place.
Absolutely. Yes. So, if my listeners would like to learn more from you and get in touch with you and receive your support, where can they find you and how can they get to know you a little better?
Sure. So they can find me on Instagram. My handle is at illuminate.nyc, ILLUMINATE.NYC. You can also check me out on my website, which is www.illuminate.nyc. And happy to perhaps offer a few links if you'd like to get onto my newsletter list and hear about, future workshops that are coming up.
Yeah, I know you host workshops and you have some coming up, and that's a really good place to be able to find all of those. Of course, I'll put all of the links in the show notes for my people to come and be able to follow you. But absolutely, you are an expert in this area. And I've learned so much, not just about the Enneagram, but about how to incorporate it really, and not just making you a better parent, but making you, I don't want to say a better person, but making you a more alive and aware. person in
Mm.
your life. And that's what it's really all about. So thank you so much for coming on and taking the time to share this with my audience. It's been so great having you.
Well, thank you. And thank you for all your questions. I really experienced your own genuine interest, which I think is what makes any topic and any conversation so alive. So really, really experienced that. Thank you. It's been an honor.